You say it at funerals. You say it when a celebrity dies. You've probably typed it as a hashtag without thinking twice. Rest in peace. It sounds gentle. It sounds like comfort. But for most of the history of that phrase, it wasn't comfort at all. It was a request, a desperate one. Here's what nobody tells you. The phrase comes from the Latin requiescat in pace, and you can still find it carved into stone in the Roman catacombs, some of the oldest Christian burial sites in the world. But early Christians weren't writing it as a farewell. They were writing it as a plea. The historian Eric Rebillard, who has studied how early Christians cared for their dead, has shown that this wasn't sentiment. It was theology. Early believers held that the body needed to remain undisturbed, whole, and literally at rest until the resurrection of the dead. Disturbing a grave wasn't just disrespectful. It could interfere with a soul's future. So when someone carved requiescat in pace onto a tomb, they meant it as instruction as much as hope. Stay still. Stay whole. Wait. Would you want your grave disturbed while you waited for that? Because for centuries, plenty of graves were. Fast forward to the 1700s and 1800s, and something happens that turns this quiet Latin prayer into something closer to a warning. Medical schools across Europe needed bodies to teach anatomy. Legally, they could only use the corpses of executed criminals. It wasn't nearly enough. So a black market appeared almost overnight, run by men who came to be called resurrectionists. Body snatchers. They didn't call themselves that, of course, but that's what they were. Under cover of night, they dug up freshly buried corpses and sold them to medical schools for dissection. The historian Ruth Richardson, who wrote extensively on this exact period in British history, documented just how widespread and organized this practice became. Entire criminal networks formed around it. Families started guarding graves in shifts. Some paid for iron cages, called mort safes, to be locked over coffins until the body had decomposed enough to be worthless to thieves. Rest in peace was no longer a hopeful phrase carved in stone. It was something families were actively fighting to make true. And it got stranger. Around the same period, a genuine medical panic swept through Europe and America, the fear of being buried alive. Doctors of the era had limited ways to confirm death, and horror stories spread of coffins exhumed with scratch marks on the inside. Historians debate how common this actually was, but the fear itself was very real, and it was taken seriously enough that inventors patented what became known as safety coffins. Some included a bell above ground, connected by a cord to the dead person's hand, so that if they woke up, they could ring for help. Others had breathing tubes built directly into the coffin lid. Think about that. An entire industry existed to make sure the dead could ask for help if they weren't actually dead yet. The historian Philippe Ariès, whose work reshaped how scholars think about attitudes toward death in Western history, argued that this era marks a turning point. Death stopped being something people accepted calmly as part of life, the way earlier generations had. It became something to be feared, managed, and controlled. Rest in peace, once a quiet request rooted in religious belief, became tangled up with real anxiety about what happens to a body once it's in the ground. By the time the phrase reached the modern world, it had been stripped almost completely of that history. Today you'll see it shortened to 3 letters and typed under a celebrity's photo within minutes of their death announced. It's automatic. It's polite. Nobody typing it is thinking about grave robbers, or resurrection theology, or bells wired to a corpse's hand. But for over 1,000 years, someone carving those words into stone meant something specific and urgent. Don't disturb this body. Let it stay whole. Let it wait undisturbed for whatever comes next. So the next time you type those 3 letters without a second thought, remember what they used to carry. A prayer against grave robbers. A plea rooted in the fear of premature burial. A belief that the dead were still, in some sense, waiting. You say rest in peace like it's just a phrase. It used to be a request people were willing to build iron cages and wire bells into coffins to protect,